young or mobile, nubile these days.
Nubile.
That's right.
Yeah.
There is,
Mayday, Mayday, Mr. Robinson. That was from Lost in Space, right?
yeah,
Mayday.
yeah. Well, danger, danger.
Right. Danger, Mr. Robinson.
It was, yeah, Will.
Will Rob, yeah.
And they, I don't know though. I mean, lost in space. I mean, that's kind of where we are now.
We are. We're
Sort
very
of lost
lost.
on Earth.
Lost on, yeah. Well, Earth is in space, so
Well, I see. There you go. So we are lost in space.
we are.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing to know you're lost, because then that's the first thing for you to find yourself, I guess. Even if you find yourself on Earth or in
Or at
space.
least enjoy being lost. Then, if you just like, I had a yoga teacher that was really cool because I used to really suffer from the cold, and she was like, and I'm like, what can the winters were just devastating. And she just had a session with me one time, and she just said, when you're cold, just feel the cold. She's like, I mean, I know it sounds kind of new agey, whatever, but she was just like, be with the cold, you
We
know,
were,
and
yeah.
breathe it in, right, and make it part of your experience. And I was like, it's kind of it's kind of corny, but I kind of did it, and I was like, no, I don't get it as cold anymore. I don't get negatively impacted by cold anywhere near as much.
Well, I think that's good. It's like we
Oh,
were
why
talking.
can't I hear this?
Oh, there's Tammy.
Tammy's got like
There
a
we go.
halo around her. Look at that.
Wow. That is awesome.
It's because I'm angelic.
You are indeed.
Well, there's that.
You're eclipsing you eclipse the light.
Ah,
You have a
it's
corona. You have a corona surrounding you.
it's because I'm getting ready for Cinco de Mayo. Get it? Corona, Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
never
totally.
mind.
I remember when AIDS came out, and like there was the diet pill called AIDS, and when the disease started happening, and there was a diet pill called AIDS, and their marketing pitch was get AIDS, basically. And that
Failure, big
yes.
fail.
Yeah, and I think
Well, like that Subway ad I posted, Tammy commented on it when I posted it. It's Soylent, right? There's a nutrition drink called Soylent.
Yes.
I was like, you gotta be kidding! Did somebody not watch
that's on
that
purpose.
movie?
Well,
Like
that's on purpose.
the marketing team is too young to remember that movie because who would market something called Soylent that's like
Right? I know.
and it's a protein drink?
Well, it's like what's happening now. It's like they're seeing if they can get away with it. If people will drink something called Soylent, knowing full well that it's probably made of dead people. And there it is. People, if they're drinking it, then maybe there's a shot that they can make it work.
Right. I mean, you better read those ingredients.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you were just talking about the cold, and yesterday we were talking a little bit about Stanislaw Lem and this idea of Solaris, that you would just accept something and live it or live with it, and so if you decide to live with it, then it's sort of like being sad about it, accepting it maybe, but accepting it on its terms. And if you live it, then you're accepting it on your terms. You're becoming one with it. So, I mean, that's not always positive necessarily, but I think in terms of cold, you can put on a hat, or you can just, which is like living with the cold, or you can just be one with the cold, in which case you're living the cold.
You're living the cold. Yes, you are the cold, and therefore it's not cold to you.
No, and either way, you're still here, so it worked.
I guess.
You didn't succumb.
So you went to the city, right? Since the last time we talked, Mario?
Yes.
So I'm dying to hear.
It was pretty uneventful, honestly. I mean, because you go, right, and it's not the city that I used to live in. Like, you know what I mean? It's definitely sort of qualitatively different because of the paucity of people. The people that are on the streets are people who would typically be on the streets anyway, but just not with everybody else, right? And like that's one of the things that's happening apparently with the subway, which is now why they're closing them from 1 to 5. They're not in the morning. They're not closing them to clean them. necessarily. They're closing them to kick out the homeless people, because now the homeless, like they have those pictures of Africa, with all these with so many less people, the animals are kind of taking over the streets and whatnot. Well, in New York City, with so much less people, it's the homeless folks who are coming out of the woodwork and not having to hide anymore, and they're just kind of laying on the streets and just laying out there, right? Like the lions on the road in the Sahara.
Right. Now, of course, in Africa, the lions are on the street corners because of urban encroachment.
Right.
So in New York, it's I guess it's the opposite of encroachment in a way. It's like a dissipation of society.
It's retreating, yes, because of societal retreat. It's like the gentrified retreat, and then the homeless kind of move out, right, and surge forward.
So it must really feel like some sort of scene from a dystopian movie.
Oh, it totally does, because the people that are on the people that are on the streets, are not wearing masks or any kind of protective equipment, whatever, because they're just out there. They're the ones who they have nothing to begin with, and they have nothing to lose for sure, and so it's pretty bizarre.
Well, I used to take the Houston Street subway to work every day. And I lived on 6th Street in the East Village, and I would go, and every day I would pass these homeless people, and I kind of got to know them,
Right.
And I would say, you know how it is, right? And you kind of like say hello and all that kind of stuff. And you kind of develop a relationship over time.
Yeah, right. Well, they really like my dog, so my dog is a big part of that. Yeah.
Right, and you know how it is sometimes in the winter in New York, it can really freeze.
Mm.
And I know that was one of those nasty freezes that we had, like a real nasty cold, and I never saw any of those guys again.
Mm.
Like the people who I had made friends with.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Corona, of course, because they're not wearing masks. So the test is, whether they're going to all be culled, or whether it's, it's like they can, from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, can they take the mask off?
Right.
Because it's really a scam, or will they die?
Hmm. Well, the other movie that comes to mind is Andromeda Strain. Did we talk about this already?
No, I don't think so.
Well, you remember Andromeda Strain? Remember
Sure.
who the people were who survived? There were 2 people who survived. You remember them?
Tell me.
Tammy, you remember?
No, it's been a while since I read the book and seen the movie.
Yeah,
but
so
I've done both.
I didn't read the book. So I'm not sure if it stays consistent. But in the movie, 2 people survive, right? Everybody's blood turns to sand, right?
Right.
And when you cut their veins, then just sand comes out, right?
Right.
Powderized blood. But 2 people survived: a baby with colic and an alcoholic.
Right. Right.
And it was determined that because of the over-oxygenation of the baby's blood, because of the constant crying, right,
Mm-hmm.
made their blood acidic from the over-oxygenation, right? And obviously the alcoholic had a high, alcohol blood content. And it was the acidity of the blood that saved both of them.
So you think being freaked out and drunk then is kind of the way to go?
Yeah, right.
Well, hyperventilating and drunk. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Complete like panic attack, tantrum type style, like meltdown mode, or just completely wasted.
Right. And so I wonder what the secret ingredients are for Corona.
Right.
Is it complacency that will cure you?
Yeah, it's complete disregard, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Is it? Really, there's some weird stuff going on. It's like, I think beyond. It's interesting. A bunch of states are starting to free up, as it were.
You guys are, right? Arizona's opening.
No, it's been pushed 15 days.
Yeah, everybody's pissed.
But what's interesting is that if you believe any of the numbers, the numbers that are being promoted, the graphs of who's got what have nothing to do with whether the states are being opened. Hawaii, which is pretty much done, peaked and done, is there's no hope of that ever coming back online in the near future. And other states
They just don't want anybody, right? Hawaii was paying people to leave.
Exactly.
Great opportunity, for them. And other states, a lot of Midwestern states, based on the numbers, are peaking just now.
Yeah.
They suddenly jacked up, but they don't care. They're sick
in the midst of it.
Yeah, I mean, they're just done. And so it's more about being pissed off and done with what is potentially, an aggressive test of some sort of fascism, versus any real numbers that anyone's publishing. Because I think whatever perspective you have on the numbers, I don't think anyone disagrees that the numbers are just wrong.
They're not working. Yeah.
And you could think, oh my gosh, they're much worse.
You can't have two different numbers by the CDC and a different number yet by the state. And the CDC has all of the state numbers and then a total number. And all of these things are completely different. I mean, you can't have that and then say that you have a handle on the numbers, because you can't. Because we don't know which one is right, if any of them are.
Well, but see, then it always goes and you explain it so clearly when you enumerate it like that. But because the confusion is so clearly enumerated when you pinpoint the discrepancies, it just makes me think that maybe the confusion is by design so that the numbers become irrelevant. And again, that's an intentional. That's a created irrelevancy, right? So it does. So if 1,000 is whatever, right? If 1,000 is really the number, but you have numbers like 5,034,
right?
Then the 1,000 becomes as irrelevant as those other two, and that's problematic.
It becomes a tool of divisiveness.
It's really problematic. And when you think about the fact that what disturbs me is that, like, from the very beginning, right? I wasn't trying to be a troublemaker. I was just trying to say, gee whiz, I'm ex-nuclear, and these numbers don't make sense to me. And I've got a real thing about numbers making sense and matching and being correct, because they beat that shit into you when you're in the nuclear industry. And I was beat up so hard for asking the question. Why don't these numbers that are all reported by the CDC and the people that report to them, why aren't they at least close? Like, I could handle 35 and even 50, right? It was that far off. I mean, I would have been arrested for that in the NRC, but that's okay. I could handle that, or even 35 and 100. But 35 and then 2,000, to me, call me crazy, but that seems unacceptable.
Yeah.
And what is that offset? I mean, what are those? Like, what is the difference between the detail of Corona and the big number they post in the front?
Oh, it's like twice. So, as a matter of fact, if you give me just 1 second, I will look I have it up, because I pull it up every day to make sure it's still changing and to make sure that I'm not insane, although, I'm starting to really wonder. Okay, so the total deaths, according to the main page of the CDC for the U.S., and on this main page, it also includes Guam and Puerto Rico and what is it? The U.S. Virgin Islands and the Northern Mariana Islands. Okay, so it also includes all of those numbers. So that number is 60,057, right? This is from yesterday. Now, the breakdown, which does not include, it includes all of the states plus Puerto Rico, but not those other island nations. So you expect it to be a little bit different, but its number is 34,521. Now that's a huge frickin' difference.
Yeah.
Huge.
Well, factor
not
two,
acceptable.
Right?
So,
Well, it's interesting, the CDC clearly is, I mean, they're doing it on purpose. They're obviously not stupid at the CDC. So there's something that's going on, which is, being done on purpose. One thing, having two such sets of numbers allows for people to politicize the numbers, because basically you can use the numbers any way you want to.
Right.
But I wonder, so who controls the CDC? Since and there's all this stuff, Tammy, you were talking about how they're being given these very serious and direct and severe marching orders about how to code deaths, and they do pretty much want as many things possible to be coded as corona. I mean, guessing and maybes and if you feel it, is part of it. So
did they sniffle when they came in? COVID.
So maybe something like that's involved too. But then I think if that's their marching orders, well, then where are they getting those orders from? And I think, well, who controls the CDC? And it's really HHS, right? Health and Human Services. And then you've got that guy, running Health and Human Services.
Azar.
Yes, exactly. And, now he's starting to get a little bit of heat. But the question is, why is Health and Human Services asking the CDC to come up with two sets of numbers? And so then it becomes, the guy, his name is Azar? Azar, right, Azar. He used to work for Lilly. For a while, he was president of Lilly.
Eli Lilly?
Yeah. And Lilly has a lot of activities in China, quite a lot, actually. So it's kind of interesting that, and then I wonder, maybe that's the angle in. It could be, I just don't see that it's benefiting Trump in any way. It doesn't seem like the Trump administration is really the ones behind any of this. If anything, it's the Biden side. But then I think if, it's, the HHS guy, Azar, with ties to all this kind of, it was interesting during the SARS thing, when Rumsfeld's company, Gilead, at the time, was the only, and he was the sitting Secretary of Defense. He was chairman, or at least had very recently been chairman of Gilead, which at the time of SARS was the only company to have the cure of Tamiflu. And so, and that was partly why it didn't work, I think, back then, if that was a test, because it was just too obvious in a way. And so they've made it a little bit less obvious now. But still,
but nevertheless, Trump really tried to push that malaria drug, and his portfolio contains, stocks from the company that.
But it's really minimal is the thing. Like he would get maybe $1,500, like if it went skyrocketing. I mean, it's pretty minimal what he has in that. Now, don't get me wrong. Trump is a tool. He should not be allowed to speak. And yet, he's our president. So I'm not a ginormous Trump fan.
But he certainly has friends who have stronger positions. And, if anything, he's definitely the cheerleader for that sort of thing. So it makes perfect sense that he would want to promote something that he had.
But the thing that the CDC is promoting is the other one.
Right.
The remdesivir.
So I don't think they're on the same page, and then also.
Well, they're clearly not. I mean,
Fauci. And then with Fauci too, it's like
Fauci is the one in charge of the remdesivir.
Right. And so, and that's really that's all HHS stuff. So I think that, if you remember from, the X-Files movie, it was FEMA, was the evil Texas mafia, so to speak, the cabal that was running everything. And now I think it's coming through HHS.
Might be. Who's probably run by the WHO, for all we know. Who's clearly run by China. So there's
a lot of people saying
twisted spider web there.
And then it's also very interesting that you have people like Bill Gates who are really promoting this. Everyone should have a card to prove that they, are viable.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's really a dangerous slippery slope. I mean, that's what Russia is doing. In Russia, you have to have a digital pass to go outside. So if you go outside and your phone doesn't have the right code on it, you get arrested.
Can you imagine?
So that's weird, right? I mean, but you think, oh yeah, Russia, of course that makes sense. So, but then to have that happening here because of a virus, which is really a bad cold, and that, the homeless people don't seem to get, too much when they're left free, and that a lot of people don't get it. Most people don't get it. Most people don't get it. I mean, it's hard, don't get sick from it. I mean, it's hard to argue with that.
Right.
And many people probably have had it. And this discrepancy with the numbers, leads to this thing. Oh, I'm sure they're way worse. And they are way worse, I think, in terms of people who have had it or will get it, and the CDC for flus and normal colds have algorithms, they know how to predict how many gazillions of people have it versus the death rate. I believe the death rate's more or less accurate, if not too high. I believe that's probably too high.
Well, if more people have it that are undiagnosed,
then
that will dilute the death rate, right? Because I mean, more people have it and less people are dying from it. I mean, like we talk about us, we've never been tested, but I think there's a really good chance that it went through our family in December.
Yeah, we had the same experience. We had all those the classic thing of the scratchy throat, and I was definitely in bed for 2 days. I definitely felt I thought I had a flu or something.
Yeah,
and but I had that weird throat thing, and but it was gone and over with, and I just. Based on everything, I feel, because that's all I can do about it, is that I had it. I think Tammy had it too. And a lot of people I talked to feel it went through their families and that they had it. So I think that like a flu or a cold, you're going to see the real number of people who've had it are in the millions. 35, 50 million people have had it because it's really a cold. It's a bad cold, maybe. Yeah. Really a bad one. Let's say it's a really bad cold, but it's still a cold. It's still a bad cold. And, the world is shut down because of a bad cold.
Well, and what's disturbing to me is that doctors are starting to have it up to here with all of this, right? So a lot of doctors and nurses are braving the onslaught of shit that they will catch because, you do catch shit, and they're coming out and they're making videos and they're saying, okay, we did testing here. This is what we do. Here's our numbers using the CDC algorithms that they already use for the flu and many other things, right? They do a random sampling. Now there's been at least 3 that I know of, and there's probably more, and one could argue, Sweden, right? So there's all of these tests have been done where they've done the random sampling, they've applied the CDC algorithm, and it turns out that the death rate is equal to or just under the flu. And every time one of those comes out that says, hey, I don't know, I mean, we could be wrong, but these are our things, please peer review us. And then inevitably someone says, oh, well, no. Okay, so you can't just judge things by one sample. And yet, that's exactly what they shut the country down on. Only a bad sample with worse numbers. So my thing is, well, okay, so there's at least 3. And then, like I said, one could argue Sweden, right, who's been doing their own thing, and other samples in other countries where they know how to do math, and they figured out that the death rate is extremely low. Well, still they're like, no, don't open up and you need to stay home which I swear to God, if I see one more ad that says stay home and stay home for them, I'm going to say, no, they can fucking stay home. Okay. I need to go to work. Sorry.
Well, it's interesting.
But you know what I mean? It's I just want to scream. It's just so stupid.
Well, we keep seeing these ads about, we're all in it together. And that really reminds me of Animal Farm. It's like all animals are equal. But we know what the caveat is to that. Some animals are more equal than others. And so, you see the guys on their yachts, that whole thing. Right. Where they're like, hey, yeah, we're all in it together.
They fell out with their yachts.
Yeah.
I don't mind that they're on a yacht. Good for them. Except don't tell me that we're all in it together. Is the thing.
Right. Because unless I can come live on their yacht with them, we're not in it together.
Right, and I don't want to live on their yacht with them.
No.
And I just don't want to hear that we're all in it together because...
Right, exactly.
I remember during 9/11 and the neo-Republicans were kind of taking the flag and they had co-opted the flag. And that really used to bug me. Like when you go into an intersection and there would be like all these like zombie young Republicans waving flags, like honk if you love Bush, you know? And it was like really making me ill at the time. And now I think that it's like the idea of be safe, you know, is like being co-opted by, you know, like you can't say, if I hear like someone say, oh, be safe, you know, one more time, I'm going to like, I know what's going to happen to me again, you know?
Well, you know, it's also going to create budget increases for the work that we do, right? Because we are now, no matter what level of production we work on, we're going to have additional costs, right?
Yep.
Because now there's going to have to be, did you see the article in Hollywood Reporter?
Oh, and it was on Variety too. I know. I just wanted to rip out my skin.
All the protocols and whatnot that are going to be required in terms of like, you're going to have like somebody on set whose job is to take everybody's temperature.
Yeah.
Right. And then craft services have to be organized in a different way. Right. And everybody has to be able to be delivered their, you know, sort of craft packages, if you will. Like everybody kind of gets an allotment for the day kind of thing, you know?
Well, you know, it's, I mean, it's a little bit stranger than that because it's so severe that, you know, they can't trust these electronic temperature things. And of course, an oral temperature isn't really accurate. So a lot of the producers are, especially with the female talents, are requiring that the temperatures have to be taken rectally.
Okay then.
But I think it was the wave of the future.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's the new
makeup department, right? The makeup department. Another thing that I read, you know, very practical, right? The makeup department has to have different brushes for everybody that the makeup department. So, you know, you might even be better off having the talent bring their own brushes. Right.
Yeah. Well, and now you're going to have to pay them $500 so they can get the best brushes
and
their own makeup. And oh my fucking God, I'm sorry.
You have to wash the costumes more frequently and with a more sort of rigorous sort of washing protocol and whatnot.
But you know, union productions, I mean, a solid, normal union production has way more expensive. Oh, it has so many different levels of expense that you have to play within the rules. That's
of course. Yeah. But this is going to be another layer, though. This is another one.
But independents often don't play by those rules. I mean, if you can get away with not doing a SAG shoot, for example, you know, it saves you a significant amount of pain and suffering and money.
Yes.
Right.
You may not get great talent, but you may get great talent. And I think that, you know, we just shot this Corona movie as it was all heating up, and we were like under the wire. Like the day we stopped shooting was the next day was when they shut down Arizona, literally.
Yeah.
And you know, but no one really. I mean, some people were a little squeamish than others. Some people wouldn't do it. We lost talent. They just wouldn't. How could you ask me to, you know, do this? But the people we had, the talent we had, and the crew we had didn't really care. And you know, like I said, I think previously, we were in these very, you know, these particularly hot spots for the coronavirus, and no one got sick.
Yeah. Did you do follow-up? Nobody got sick?
Nobody got sick, and I've been talking to all of them. Nobody. We were on the sick side of a doctor's office. No one even got a frickin' sniffle. As a matter of fact, the two people that said they wanted to go because they felt like their throat was a little scratchy, but that was, I think,
we had issues
with it. Yeah, it was a different issue. But
they're violating the substance abuse clause.
Well, no, I think there was a personality issue between them and their department head.
Oh, I see.
So,
but you know, it's interesting. There is a list which you can go to. It updates all the time, and that is of the deaths, corona deaths per million population by country.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that the countries with the biggest death rate, given that analysis, are the ones who are locked down the hardest. And it's true, Sweden actually has a higher one than the U.S. does. The U.S. is currently, as of today, about 180 deaths per million. The biggest one...
depending on the number you pick, by the way.
Depending on whatever numbers they're using.
Yeah.
But relatively, Belgium is the worst one with 800, I think.
Oh my God.
800 deaths per million.
Wow.
And they were locked down, one of the hardest that were locked down. Sweden's about 200 and something. And of course, they just did the experiment of not doing anything.
Right.
The US, and Sweden's quite rural. I mean, a lot of Sweden is rural, but a lot of people don't live in the rural parts. In America, many people live in the rural parts. And the cities, you've got key cities, which are Chicago and New York are, having trouble relatively, given the numbers and everything. But a lot of other places aren't. And except for this, ramp that just took place with the Midwestern states, a lot of them spiked and are done. Like Ohio's done, and all these, there's a handful of states that just peaked and were done. And yet a whole bunch of other states are really still ramping. It's not getting any better.
Right.
Based on the numbers, but nonetheless, like I said earlier, some of them are still deciding to just say forget it because it's still a bad cold. I think that's what they're really realizing on some level. And the thing is that, like with a coronavirus, everybody gets it. With Ebola, thank God it's not Ebola. But with Ebola, you just can't mess with people's blood, or have them cough blood on you, and that's something you can really see. And so even when Ebola outbreaks come on, they don't get so huge because it's so obvious to see, what's going on with Ebola. But coronaviruses and rhinoviruses and a variety of these other cold viruses, everybody gets them, and because there's no way not to. They get everywhere. And that's why people get the cold during cold season. And in cold season, it's the same thing. People get the cold. And, granted, this is a bad cold. It's not the same thing as a rhinovirus or other coronaviruses. It's a really bad cold. But it still has similarities to colds in that it gets everywhere. And there's no getting away from it. There just isn't.
When they come up with a vaccine, are you guys going to get vaccinated?
No, hell no.
If it were something like Ebola or something really unpleasant or something that I personally felt wasn't a total scam, I would consider it. But based on what we're seeing with this, it's like, it just seems like this whole thing is a scam.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it also, here's the thing. They're talking about a lot of the talk is they're not going to open the country until there's a vaccine. Well, I'm sorry, but the country will be in a fucking toilet before then.
That's like 2 years away.
Right, exactly. And if they have a vaccine and they rush it out before the end of the year, and they're going to convince me that there was actual testing done on that vaccine, then either the conspiracy is way bigger than we thought because they've been working on this shit for a decade, or it's not really tested. And I'm not going to be anybody's guinea pig.
Yeah.
I have a pretty strong immune system. I'll take vitamin C, whatever. Like Rusty said, if it was Ebola and they had a good, verified, tested, shit I could look up vaccine, hell yeah, I would take it. I don't want to get
the
Ebola.
inside out.
Yeah, exactly.
But it worries me that Microsoft's going to be head of some sort of weird thing that requires that you get the vaccine.
Yeah, and that's
digitally on your phone.
Right.
That is
and you can't participate in society unless you can show your papers.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
Yeah. That's like communist crazy ass bullshit. That's like Nazi regime.
But we're really looking at the potential of this happening. It's really serious.
Right.
It's like, oh, it's a bad cold. It's not serious. It's serious because of the political ramifications of what's taking place.
And the societal manipulation that's going on.
Yeah, it's unacceptable.
Right. And it's all those people in the yachts that aren't going to ever have to be
exactly
show their card, right?
Right.
It's everyone else that's going to have to show their card, and then I have resisted getting flu vaccinations, for the longest time, despite my wife's recommendations otherwise, because I just feel like I know they say that they're vaccinating us with something, with an antibody for whatever disease. But there's a couple of things that are so problematic, right? If they roll the dice, because it's always a roll of the dice, right? They roll the dice, and if they create a vaccine for the wrong flu that happens to become, widespread for that season, is basically ineffectual, right?
Right.
It's like shooting yourself up with water.
Right, right. It's a best guess.
And it's just right. It's just a best guess. So you're taking a crapshoot there, number one. Number two, we're not doctors. I don't know what else they're putting in that vaccine, right? They could be putting, nanomolecules in there that track other things, my whereabouts. They could track,
right.
My alcohol content, and constantly be, uploading data to somebody about whether I'm drinking or not, or doing whatever, right?
Well,
Exactly.
in all these things, the genie's out of the bottle in many ways with technology. Poindexter was or still is running, the Constellation thing with the Big Brother data set. And there's no way not to do that. I mean, it's possible, and they're going to do it, and there's no way for them not to do it. Just like, the government was always, they've got Apache attack helicopters, and Second Amendment aside, we can't have Apache. We're just not going to have Apache attack helicopters to match the power of the government. But so it comes down to the trust that we have in the government, the trust we have in technology, the trust we have in medicine. And, there's the old saying that, people should not be afraid of the government should be afraid of the people. And something like that, the liberty, the prime nature of liberty needs to be preserved. And I know it's a balance, and, obviously liberty and death, is kind of a balance. And sure enough, it's like if it was something serious, then the more serious it really is. And what I mean by that is the more perceived serious it is by people who look out in the street and see people dying in the street, or see, Chinese helicopters or Russian helicopters coming in, then it's like, okay, I'll buy into this and let's do something, But when you don't have a perception, and when they're not knocking on your door, then it's easy not to perceive a problem.
Right.
And so when you're watching television and no one's knocking on the door, then, you're happy. You've got food, you've got TV, and no one's bothering you. So What could be bad?
Well,
the no money thing is a bit of a problem. That's a little bit of a snafu.
The what?
The what?
When you don't have money.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge snafu. I mean, because I can tell you what, if we had money, we'd buy a frickin' Apache helicopter and we'd go to an island, and I would just say, screw this shit, call me when it's done.
Right.
We blow away everyone on the island first, and then we take it over.
Right.
There you go. Yeah, there's plenty of empty islands out there. I'd rather go to one where nobody knows about it. We accidentally find it.
I'll tell you, all this is making me definitely want to go off the grid.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Off the grid is, again, this throws us right back into sci-fi movies, right? Like Logan's Run, and the one guy, right? The one guy who won't, cooperate. Well, that was the thing in Soylent Green, right? The Charlton Heston character, was trying to educate people, right? It's made of people. That last image, right, of him with the fist up high, right? Soylent Green is people, right?
Right.
Exactly. Have you read the Traveler series, the John 12 Hawks books, Mario?
I have not.
Oh, you need to. You should.
Well, the thing is, as a
or do the audio
genre, I'm not particularly a huge sci-fi fan, actually. Right? It's just
Not
I find
really
myself
sci-fi.
in the middle of a sci-fi movie right now.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The Traveler books are not really sci-fi, unfortunately. They're very much what we're sort of living through in a way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
very sophisticated versions of 1984, basically.
Well, kind of. Yeah, it's
multi-dimensional. The sophisticated.
Yeah, it's. I would say, listen. If you do audiobooks, listen to the first one.
What's the first one called?
The Traveler.
The Traveler.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be confused with the TV show, The Travelers.
Right, which is different. Yeah. And
you definitely know you have it because the author's name is John 12 Hawks.
Yeah.
John 12 Hawks. Okay.
Unmistakable name.
He lives off the grid. Nobody knows who he really is. But I can tell you that I had some people I know who worked in government's computer psyop security kind of stuff, and I had them read that book and that series, and they were like, everything he's talking about is real.
Wow.
Yeah, it's scary. And,
Well,
you know, a lot of it, I still kind of went, yeah, maybe okay. In their little fantasy world, it's real, like it's possible, but they're not really doing it. And what we're going through now just kind of makes me go, oh, okay.
well, I mean, I come from a technology background, and to me, it's not so much of a shock. It's just known that all these things are happening.
Right.
And that comes back to this genie in the bottle and the trust. And so somehow there has to be a mechanism whereby liberty is preserved by the populace and that they can have a method, an ability to claim their liberty against a potentially aggressive government.
But I think you need reliable media for that. You need reliable news for that. You need reliable sources that have the public's interest at heart. And I don't know of one right now,
But
actually.
propaganda is the oldest tool, you know. I mean,
it's bifurcated.
Circus is TV, you know. Yeah, and so there has to be a way that doesn't involve the media because the media is already co-opted. I mean, you know, the big five is now the big four, or maybe now it's three. It's hard to know, and you know, and it's all. I mean, I'm just amazed. You know, I think we've talked about it before. You know, there's a clip on YouTube which basically has all the local TV stations, and they're giving the same story. I mean, it's not just 2 or 3. It's 50. It's 100. This clip is 100, more than 100 local TV stations telling a story, and they're telling it precisely the same way. I mean, exactly. Not
with the same phrases, the same terminology,
and the same emotion,
the same words,
the same play, the same acting.
Right.
You know, and it's like unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable.
Right.
Yet there it is. So
and when CBS can and how are they still on the air? How are people not rioting in the fucking streets in front of their offices when they can put the video from Italy and say, oh, this is the New York hospital? Yeah. Not even an apology, right? And the girl with the crying, oh, I can't get my PPE, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, she's an actress. She hasn't worked as a nurse in 10 years or whatever, like at least a year. I mean, nobody says anything about that. How is that possible?
Well, we've become anesthetized. You know, I mean, it's media in general started that process, you know, years ago. As a matter of fact, I think that's one of Karl Marx's biggest errors, right? Karl Marx just couldn't anticipate the anesthetizing impact of media, right? Because he's like, the workers of the world will unite and against, you know, injustices. And you know, Martin Luther King said something very similar, you know, in terms of, you know, rise up against injustices and stuff. But they underestimated the power of the numbing, right?
But the Romans got it. You know, with bread and circus.
Yeah, give them bread and circus.
Right.
I mean, but you're right. And I mean, it's like people I know well are like, no, the media says this. I'm like, well, here's the website. Go look for yourself. I'm not making this shit up that these numbers don't match.
Well, that's why I think
doesn't that bother you?
I essentially feel like the United States has become a one-party country, and it's just, you know, which faction of the one party do you tend to side more with, right? I don't really think there's a choice because the Democratic side has become just as beholden to corporate interests as the Republican side. You can't really say that it's Republicans that are the ones that protect the corporate interests. They protect particular kinds of corporate interests, and the Democrats protect other kinds of corporate interests, right? I mean, look at the Democratic candidates that tried to run on the platform of no corporate sponsorship, right? Even Elizabeth Warren ultimately caved and said, I have to take PAC money if I want to compete. And she was very transparent about it. She's just like, look, I just can't compete without it, right? I want to win. I think I have the best message, but I can't stay in the game without PAC money, corporate sponsorship.
Of course not. And I think it's very interesting, too, now that the gentleman from Michigan, I think, who was a Republican, is now the libertarian, the first libertarian ever in Congress. And I think he's from Michigan.
He's not a governor, because Michigan.
No, he's a congressman.
And what's interesting is that, we've seen it happen with Perot. Clinton really won because Perot stole the votes from Bush the first. And then we saw it happen in Florida with Nader really taking this little margin, which is all it was needed
from Gore.
From Gore.
Yep.
And so I think the vote for a libertarian is a vote really against Biden, because those votes are really going to come out of Biden's skin, I think. Mm-hmm. And so the play of having a Republican become a libertarian who's a professional, politician, which the libertarians haven't always had a professional politician as the person running for president. And I think the libertarians have someone they like right now who's supposedly on the ballots running for president in some states. But I think this guy from Michigan, the Republican congressman who's now a libertarian, is going to try to usurp that and become the libertarian candidate for president, because he's really a Republican. And knowing that if people vote for some people will vote for a professional politician only because he knows how to be a politician. He knows how to give speeches. He knows how to raise money, so on and so forth. And so he's going to attract a lot of interest in the Libertarian Party. I'm certain of it. And it's really the only hope Trump has, I think, of winning this election is if a strong Libertarian candidate basically siphons a significant amount of votes from Biden.
I don't know. Probably. I mean, it's hard to say because
Sorry. I just said if we have an election.
If we have an election, that's right. And it's really going to be really hard not to have an election. But the states, I was looking around, the language for the states, for presidents, I mean, for other things, voting does happen and is written down in language. But for the president, all that it says is that the states are responsible for providing the electors. And that's it. That's it, period. Wow. So the governor can select them. It's really the legislature that would select them, and the Secretary of State has to be the one who signs it and delivers it. I think some states with and without the governor's signature to the Fed for counting. And there's a lot of scenarios where you could have two sets, like the governor might not agree with the legislature, who may not agree with the Secretary of State, and in this rampant chaos, which is going to take place probably if it goes that far, then there could be multiple versions of the electoral list going to the Fed from different states. It's really chaos. It's really like the breakdown of the American system because of a cold.
Yeah.
It's really weird at best. And even if it's the worst cold that's ever happened on the planet, it's taking down the American system.
Well, it's, obviously it's not the cold that's doing it. It's it's like, one thing we never heard again from that fabulous doctor in Oxford, the Oxford doctor. This came out way in the beginning. She was like, what I cannot believe is that any of this stuff is happening based on a second-rate school's white paper, essentially. Yeah, second-rate university's white paper thing. Oxford, it was the Oxford, she was talking about, what was it, Lincoln, or it was another UK school.
It's London College School.
Yeah. She's like, well, I can't believe that any of this is happening based on this, basically, essentially, in more professional words, I can't believe any of this has happened based on this dimwit's paper from a second-rate school, because I've done the work too, and this is what it looks like. Now, that was back in February? Late January, something like, when all this shit was just starting, and people were starting to, panic, and the news media was 24 hours a day, panic, please panic. We need you to panic. Make sure you panic. There's lots of reasons to panic. And you know, Michael Crichton is probably just going, I told you so, right? Because he wrote The State of Fear and he told everybody, be careful about the news media. They're not here for you. Right. And he was right.
But we've got to somehow thwart it. I mean, it has to be thwarted. In other words, we can't look at America next year and see that we have to have digital papers in order to be processed on be checked on the street by machine gun bearing police, because we have to prove that we have the right papers, which are really going to be whatever they are by that time.
I mean, it's a scary set of affairs when I feel like the only person we can trust to not do this to us is the bonehead that's the president right now. I mean, I don't even like that guy, right? But of all of the idiots we have in charge up there, he's the only one I think that probably won't do that because it's not in his best self-interest.
Well, it could be,
I mean, that's a scary thing that I trust that guy more than I trust anybody else in charge.
That's pretty scary. I mean,
it's scary.
He was considering draining the swamp, but I think the swamp is swallowing him whole.
I think what's happening. Trying, but yeah, I know.
And comment on drinking Lysol. That was interesting. I mean, I think he should try it. I think he should take a. I think he should take
he never said that. I mean, I watched that video. He was just talking about because they do stuff with UV light internally where they're trying to disinfect, and that's what he was talking about. Granted, he's a moron. He can't put 3 sentences together and sound like a human being, right? Because he's so inept. But still, I still think he's more trustworthy than anybody else that we have a choice of right now. And that's a scary fucking thing.
He may sometimes mean well, but I think he should never be allowed to speak.
He shouldn't be allowed to speak. No,
he shouldn't be president. That's for certain.
I don't know that he means well, honestly.
I'm not sure that he ever.
I think everything he says is designed, and this is not my reaction to him as a Republican. This is my reaction to him just as an individual. I think that everything he says is designed to create as much chaos, uncertainty, distrust, suspicion as absolutely possible, so that nobody trusts anybody, so that he sounds the most reasonable of everybody, and well, it's like he's as good as anybody else, and why not, right? Kind of thing. But he is president after all, right?
But imagine the scenario where he's the most reasonable person speaking.
Yeah,
I mean, that's impossible.
That's what we've got right now, and that's a scary thing.
But the thing is, again, I go back to that's by design, right? That's by design of the fact that he creates as much. He undermines as many things as he possibly. Look what he did to the federal government, right? He put a guy in charge of the EPA that sued the EPA. He put a woman in charge of the education department that doesn't believe in public education. He put people in charge of the Fed who doesn't believe in federal well,
it's a very good point.
Regulation.
It's a really good point because in this scenario, like we were talking about, where the American system is being systematically or just outright destroyed, he's actually at the zenith of this process.
Absolutely. Yeah,
he's been destroying the traditional American system of government since day one.
Right.
I mean, with very few exceptions, where I think he's done a few things that are pretty interesting, but mostly he's just an iconoclastic destroyer,
right?
Of the American way, of the American political system. Now,
even John Boehner, right? I really wasn't a super fan of John Boehner, but I got to give it to him. Even Boehner was like, I can't deal with this guy.
Right. And even, I mean, some people are saying like, yeah, drain the swamp. We should be crushing this terrible political system we have. And okay, fair enough. You can agree with that in some ways.
Right.
But in concert now with what's happening with the coronavirus, and what's really destroying the American way of life, let's put it that way. Then now with that, it's a different perspective on what Trump is doing.
Right.
It does to me. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
and the
and
people that are helping to destroy it, unfortunately, aren't even at the top. Because I mean, I look at the.
I think that Trump is he's playing his role in also destroying the whole system. I mean, it's another way to look at it.
Possible, I suppose.
Total destruction from everyone. I mean, you can't turn. I mean, everywhere you turn, it's like people are like, stay inside. You know, I'm worried that the internet's going to go off.
Yeah.
Then there's going to be a police car with a loudspeaker outside. Stay inside. Stay inside. Like that's the next thing that's going to happen.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if? I mean, you know, China has this happen to them all the time, right? Because the state just can turn on and turn off the internet as it wishes, right? Russia can do that, right? North Korea can do that. Wow. If that were to go on here, man, that would really be going back to the dark ages.
And when it happens here and Biden's in charge, then tell me who's in charge of fucking up the country.
Well,
because it's those people that are saying, don't open up, keep it closed for another, you know, I mean, the greedy, money hungry people, God bless them, open this fucking country. This, what we're doing is so crazy. It's so crazy. And when people are dying in the street because, you know, they can't get medical care because even the hospitals had to shut down because they've been having to lay people off. Because, you know, I mean, it's like the one thing that they opened, and so this is something that's kind of making me question it too. It's the only thing our useless fucking governor did. He opened the hospitals up for elective surgery. Again, elective surgery. Now, what falls under elective surgery? Brain surgery, cancer surgery, hip replacement, knee. We're not talking about boob jobs here, right? We're talking about real important things that someone's got a brain tumor, you know, they had to wait 2 months. Like, you know, who knows if they're even going to survive it. Elective surgery was everything other than what's going to kill you right this moment. So if your appendix burst, they'll go in there. You'll probably die now from the infection of having your appendix burst. But if you would have been allowed to go get that appendix surgery 3 weeks ago when your appendix was just kind of bad, you might have survived it. But now you're a 28-year-old death because of COVID, right? So, I mean, so that was the one thing that got opened up here was the hospital's quote unquote elective surgery.
Well, let me ask you this. Who do you think is benefiting from this whole corona thing?
I don't know. I know who's going to benefit when they have the vaccine.
Well, who's benefiting? I mean, who?
I say banks. I keep going back to banks. Banks are the only ones who have any positive cash flow right now.
But the banks are being hit the hardest in some ways in the stock market, I know.
But they're getting all kinds of incentives to create these loans. I mean, I'm super concerned about the immediate aftermath of this initial wave of coronavirus, because I think it's creating another huge bubble like burst in 2008. Like the real estate bubble that led up to all the debt that was being created in the real estate market that led up to the burst in 2008. I mean, they're literally approving trillions of dollars, and I understand it. I mean, we're the benefit of it. My wife's out of work, you know, she's getting part of that, you know, $600 a week bonus thing, which
helps.
It's huge. It's just huge in terms of filling the gap between what she, you know, her normal salary is and what unemployment benefits are, which is, you know, a drop in the bucket, right? So we're benefiting from it. You know, my sister-in-law got a small business loan, right? We're benefiting from it. But what's going to happen to all that debt? I mean,
what's interesting, you know, the Buffett indicator just started flashing red, you know, again. And it's a very simple calculation. it's Warren Buffett supposedly his favorite indicator, because he plays indexes. His favorite thing is to not invest in companies, of course, but in terms of stock investing, he likes indexes. And so what it does very simply is it takes the total value of all the capital value of the market and divides it by GDP at any given moment. And when the value of the market is so much high is relatively high compared to the GDP, that indicator starts going off. And so far, I think every time it's hit this peak, like it does, there's been a bubble burst.
Right. And so it hit that recently, you said?
Yesterday. And I think that a nasty bit is coming, and it was going to come anyway. Because
it was more of a slow creep, right? Now it's just like, look at those unemployment figures. 30 million people in 6 weeks.
You're right. But what's interesting is that Microsoft, Apple to some extent, and Amazon, for example, those three, they're still they're not only just trillion-dollar companies. Microsoft is still as high as it's ever been.
Right.
It's like at $1.3 trillion value.
Well, when you lay off loads and loads of people, your stock goes up because your costs go down.
Well, the other thing too with what was I reading, and this was a few weeks ago, so who knows where it is now. 43% of small businesses are closed, and they figure at least 25% will never open again. So, that's a huge number. And then you get these people, they're just greedy. They just want their money. No, they just want to feed their kids. And those stupid assholes don't want their kids on the street, those greedy motherfuckers, right? Let's not let them live. You're right.
So those people are not benefiting. But, based on what I was just saying about the stock market, Microsoft and Apple are still at their over $1 trillion valuation. A lot of things have dropped quite a bit, but they're still as high as they've ever been. And those are the two companies really promoting that we should all have papers on our phone and to be able to prove that we should be on the street at any given moment. And I think they're the ones who are benefiting, and it's somehow part of their cabal, which is creating this system, this shot at creating this system of totally destroying American freedom.
Having panopticon.
And so we have to figure out
everything we do every day.
Yeah, and people have to figure out how they can stand up to it. We have to. Otherwise, we're going to be in a bad fucking sci-fi movie.
And going off the grid is like one of the few ways to really. That's the only way that they can. It's very Freudian in a way, if you think about it, right? Because Freud said if you can't get positive feedback about your personality, you act out and you get negative feedback, because the worst thing for an individual growing up is being ignored, right? And that's kind of what we have to do. We have to ignore corporatism
somehow.
But
if we can, unless it gets legislated.
Right, exactly. And we're using Skype to do it. You know what I mean? It's like
And then there's of course we're using Skype, which you have to, of course that's what I'm just talking about is Microsoft.
Exactly.
So, we're on the bad list now. I guarantee it.
No doubt. They know who we are.
But, then there's the whole 5G thing. And I think in terms of, being ignored or not being ignored, I think to protect ourselves from the 5G, we have to begin wearing aluminum foil on our heads.
I'm going to make mine like the Sam, what's his name? The detective Sam.
I thought you were talking about Yosemite Sam.
No. Sam Sloan Sam Stone, the famous detective that
Spade?
10-gallon hat.
Sam Spade, Sam Spade, he has like a Columbo, that kind of hat. That's mine will be tinfoil like that, but it'll be like that.
Fedora.
A fedora, yes, that is the word I was thinking.
So all those crazy homeless people that wear aluminum foil on their head have been right the whole time.
They're ahead of the curve.
See?
They are. Well, you know.
Did you, I think I sent you guys the video of the former Canadian head of Microsoft talking about 5G and the potential dangers of it. He's like pro-technology, but he says this, there's just not enough research about this, and he's very concerned. And I kind of think, I had no idea about this. It's not a very long video. It's, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. So I guess it's kind of long for videos these days, but it's worth a watch. I'm pretty sure I sent it to you guys.
Yeah, I have to look at it. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. But 5G is supposed to be terrible. It's supposed to, it's just going to fry us all.
Well, mostly it's a marketing hype at this stage.
Right.
But eventually the spec is on either side of the microwave frequencies used to boil water in a microwave oven. So theoretically, it's kind of like that. The difference is that, because electromagnetism is really kind of like a light in a way, and different things are, glass is transparent to visual light, and a wall is transparent to the light that's emitted from your Wi-Fi. Box.
Right.
But it's a light still, and it's a very dim light. But the microwave is a very bright light. We can't see it, but it's a very bright light that's boiling that water relatively, where the light that you get from your cell phone is extremely dim. I mean, it's very, very dim light that antenna is picking up. So, potentially it's not the same as being boiled alive, but
but close.
It could be. We talk about kissing all frogs and trying to raise money for different projects. We have to kiss all frogs to see which one turns into a prince, meaning that even if we don't think someone's really going to come through, we got to, ask the right questions and see.
Give it a shot.
But I wonder if we're the frogs that are slowly boiling in a fire.
Well, I mean, are the oceans going to just start boiling? Is that when we'll know?
Well, I think that's when that's when we'll know.
I think if people just start dropping dead in the street, that'll be the first clue.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like that's why I was so anxious to see if you were able to drive by any of these hospitals, because that first thing that I dared to submit on Facebook that has now gotten me, the ire of everybody, had a video in there where with a bunch of different people who, had seen the thing, all the different things, and this was specifically New York because, that was like the epicenter. And when you look at the CDC numbers, of course, it's, that's the big, huge numbers are only in New York and New Jersey. And so they had seen all these long lines of people getting testing and waiting to go in because they all have COVID and blah, blah, blah. And so the next morning, they went down with their cell phones and nothing. I mean, the barriers were there and the hospitals were there, and they looked inside, and the emergency rooms are empty. There's nobody standing in line. I mean, so what does that mean?
It was staged? Huh? It was staged?
Well, I have to wonder. Yeah, maybe. That's why I was really hoping you would have gotten down there, because they're still claiming, oh, we got body bags and this and that and the other and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, all right, and then you have nurses that are coming on and saying, my friends left our state because there's no actual death here, not enough to they're laying people off, right? They're closing down places because they weren't allowed to be open.
I blame the Onion for all of this.
Yeah.
I blame the Onion for creating the culture of fake reporting. But there is a precedent for it. There was a thing that happened during 9/11, during the Gulf War, I think the Bush II's war, and it was a big thing. It seems impossible. It really seems impossible, but this happened. I was actually watching the news on television when it happened. I was in a hotel. I was clicking between channels, and it was a big advance on the Baghdad airport, and it was, like, I think we were talking about this before, and it's like, boom, bombs are going off, and the reporter's got his helmet on, and it's all over. All the channels have this on, except one is a reporter of a New Zealand newspaper, a TV station, and they're there, and there's like, guys, it's crickets. I'm here at the airport. There's nothing going on.
Oh my God.
And it became a big thing. And the Prime Minister of New Zealand, said, hey, my guys are good. I back them. What's going on here, And she got called to Washington and spent a few days with the boys there. And when she came back, she had totally drunk the Kool-Aid and was like, oh, yeah, that guy's drunk. We don't really trust them at all. Our guys are stupid. Obviously, it was a mistake.
Wow.
But I watched the whole thing happen in real time when it was all happening. It was amazing. It was amazing. And it looked like the same place,
And right. And and because of stuff like that, and, I did watch Wag the Dog and all those other movies that, talk about the false things that they can put out on the news and make it look real.
Like the Vietnam War?
Well, anything.
That's how it started,
right?
right? The Vietnam War started with a fictitious attack on a naval vessel, right?
There you go.
And some people believe that's how World War II started for the U.S.
Well, and of course, it certainly was the Germans created a situation where they said the Poles attacked them. The Japanese did the same thing in Manchuria. The Japanese set it up so the Manchurians would attack the Japanese, but it was Japanese plants inside the Manchurians. It's age old, right? It wasn't invented even in the 20th century.
Right. And Barbara Bush comes from the Pierce family, like Franklin Pierce lineage. And her family's companies were ones selling to both sides during World War I and World War II.
Right.
And
well,
also,
swing staplers, right, did the same thing, right? They were selling to Germany and to the United States at the same time.
And the Bush family had a bunch of companies, all which rolled up into Halliburton, which is very strange.
Right.
So those guys, might have been nice in a lot of ways, but they certainly weren't innocent, and you had the whole Carlyle group at that time, like we were talking about earlier. So there's a precedent for these cabals, let's call them that, that take place. And the question now is, like, what cabal is running this show?
Right.
And what's their ultimate, well, I'm afraid of what their ultimate plan might be. But, how do they win if the whole goal is to just get richer, which clearly it isn't, because if you knock out even, say, well, let's see, we got 30 million people out of work, you got 43% of your small businesses closed down, 25% of those probably aren't coming back. So that's going to be a death knell of business that's on the scale of the Great Depression, worse than the Great Depression, right? More people. So you're not going to gain because all these people are going to be out in the street, right?
Yeah, but you're going to gain by consolidation of wealth. Right, you're going to gain by consolidation of wealth. So because what was distributed to all those people is going to be bought up. It's not going to disappear. It's not going to evaporate. It's going to be absorbed by the folks who already, it's like gravitational pull, right? Lots of capital will then suck in more capital, right? And
probably. Well, the other thing,
consolidated in fewer and fewer and fewer hands.
The other thing, too, is that there's going to be a lot of people losing their homes, right? And losing their business properties. And just like when the old, when the big bankruptcy or the big foreclosure problem happened, 2008 to 2010, when everybody was losing their homes, and these illegal foreclosures, and some were resulting from bad loans that were given out. But, all these properties, like, whole neighborhoods were being evicted
Right.
And who bought most of those properties, which were initially in the hands of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, most of them, right? Even the banks, but most of them were from these pseudo governmental agencies, right? Most of those properties were bought up by Chinese companies. I mean, that's a creepy fucking thing. And this is going to happen probably again if they wait too much longer. The same thing is going to happen. And then who's going to, I mean, it's one thing to invest here, but when you're buying real estate here, you're buying land and property. And if another country owns more of our real land than we do, that's a big problem.
Yeah. Or even enough to sway a vote, right?
Yes, exactly.
They don't even have to own the majority of it. If they can own enough of it, you know, a big enough block that it becomes, you know, a tipping block in any kind of, you know, decision-making, you know, scenario, then, yeah.
Which happens. I mean, we saw that already in Oregon with Reverend Moon, you know, slowly taking over town and then working on county and then state politics.
Right.
You know, so it's something that really can happen. He didn't work out that time, but it happens in all kinds of ways that we don't see, that we're not aware of. You know, it used to be that it was the Japanese that were buying up everything in the 80s. And of course now it's the Chinese that are buying up everything. Now, it didn't work well for the Japanese because, you know, the powers that take place, you know, that control the economies, not that everyone controls it, but that direct the economies, you know, slowly but surely thwarted that. And the question is, will they thwart the Chinese advances or will the Chinese succeed in taking over the world, as it were, which a lot of people think that they will. And, you know, why not? They have in the past.
I mean, what bothers me is that so many of the American people are just like taking it, not just taking it, laying down, but fighting for the ability to be locked in their homes. Yes, damn you. How dare you want to go to work? You scumbag. Stay home for them and for them and for them. No, these people that are sick or that are immunocompromised or they're old, they need to stay home. They need to stay home, shelter in place. Let's bring them Meals on Wheels, whatever it takes. Or if you just feel like you might be, fine, whatever, stay home. But the rest of us, you know, you don't, they didn't lock out people who didn't have leprosy. They quarantined the people who had leprosy, not the people who didn't have leprosy. And that's what you do, because when it's a virus, like Rusty said, it's getting everywhere anyway. It's a teeny little thing. You can't stop it. And sure as hell, these stupid masks that we have aren't going to stop it. If you can smell your neighbor's fart, that virus is getting through. All right.
So there are clubs popping up everywhere that specifically coordinate with their neighbors.
Well, did you see?
Everyone to their own.
Did you see the? I think I told you about the video, but I don't know if I posted it. In was it Wisconsin? The police came to, you know, give a warning to two mothers who were letting their children go back, and neighbors who had been playing together all along, way before this ever happened. I'm sure they've all got the kid cooties going through both households no matter what anyway. And they came to give them a warning that they were in trouble because they were allowing their kids to go to the neighbor's house to play.
Yeah. You know, there were zombies out on the street, and they were active zombies. And people were saying that you should stay inside because the zombies will eat your brain.
That makes sense.
Inside, you know, and kids shouldn't play. And you could see that zombies were eating people in the street. You know, so I get that some people feel they just feel instinctually that this is like a pack of zombies, and that people should be afraid of the zombie virus, which is broken out, is really like, it's a psychosis. It was a psychotic virus that's now become a viral psychosis. And
except for if anyone took basic biology in school, they would know this is all a pile of shit.
And so that's just it, right? Is it zombies eating people's brains? I mean, is it that bad? Or is it really just a select cabal, an elite group of Kabbalists, basically, that, instead of calling the Texas Mafia, or the Singapore Mafia, that whatever this current cabal is, they're making a play. They're making a very serious play to do something to the American people. And it could just fester out. That's our best hope. That's my best hope, is that it just kind of doesn't work again.
Right.
Again, it doesn't quite work. But they're sure trying. I mean, somebody's really trying, because it doesn't make any sense that somebody snitches, 1984 style, snitches on two kids playing in a private yard.
Right, exactly.
It's just not right. Because it's not zombies eating people's brains. Right. It's a cold. And so people are doing this play. And it's serious, because a significant number of people totally buy it. And, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is zombies. It's as bad as zombies eating people's brains. And the world is going to be destroyed anyway because of coronavirus. So all this doesn't matter. I just don't think so. I think it's a play. I think it's a scam. And I think we're being totally duped by a nasty group of people who are trying to get away with something and seeing how far they can get.